Hi there guys, welcome to another edition of the Cover Zero show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Just going to continue the roundup of the NFC North free agency activity. This episode will be covering the Green Bay Packers, who won the division last year, made the NFC title game and got blown out by the Falcons in a game where really everything that could go wrong pretty much did. Absolutely disastrous game for them. This was after a strange season where they started the season really slow. Aaron Rodgers not looking like himself. The defense was getting gashed with ease at times. Eventually Aaron Rodgers got it together, caught fire and played superbly for the last half of the season, leading the team on a massive winning streak. As we know, the offense is very powerful in the passing game. They've got a good offensive line. Been a couple of losses there, which we will discuss. Great group of receivers. Jordy Nelson recovered from his knee injury. Played great last season, as we've grown accustomed to. Running back's a strange position there, where they really need to bring in a full-time runner. Ty Montgomery, at the end of the day, he was better than I would have expected a converted receiver to be. I know he played some running back in college and in high school, but he filled in admirably. But they could really do with a top end runner that would round out what is an otherwise devastating offense. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with regards to the offensive line. The top needs I had going into free agency for the Packers this year are running back, with Eddie Lacy as a free agent, and also the general unreliability that he's shown in the last couple of seasons. Running back is a huge need. Need inside linebackers. Clay Matthews should not be playing on the inside. He's at his best as a pass rusher. They need to get him healthy, but that's where he made his name in this league. That's where he really ought to be playing. So they could do with a top end inside linebacker. It's been a while since they've had an impact player there. And also defensive backs. We saw they need some corners. They were torn apart by the Falcons in the playoffs. Demarius Randall not ready to be a number one or possibly not even a number two at this point. I expect he'll improve. He did show flashes last year. They really missed Hayward on the back end. They need to improve that aspect of defense. Front seven's not bad. It's got some talent. It can be generally improved. As I say, the inside backers need doing, but I think corner and running back are the two needs that really stand out on that team. So they've not really been too active, as is often the case with some of the top franchises. We've only got a few moves. So Nick Perry has been re-signed on a really large deal, 5 years, 60 mil. Not sure how to feel on this one. Before last season, he'd been an absolute bust. And whilst it's not an enormous contract for a pass rusher, it's not on like the level of the Chandler Jones deal in Arizona, for example. It's not far off. And with Chandler Jones, I think you feel a bit better. There's a bit more consistency, better tape over the course of his career. Whereas Nick Perry, we've got the 1 year, and you should always, I think, be dubious as a franchise when it's a player playing in a contract year. Last season, he was signed to a 1 year prove it deal. He did prove it, had a fantastic season. I believe it was 11 sacks. Rushed the passer really well. It was probably between him and Mike Daniels for the best player in the front seven for the Packers last year. They had to retain him. I mean, Clay Matthews, love the guy. I'm not sure if he's been dealing with injuries, if he's maybe aging a little premature, as some players just do. He was never the most athletic player. He's always been a high effort guy. Perry clearly overtook him as the team's top pass rusher last season. Julius Peppers wasn't an every down player, so they needed to keep him. He's outside of Mike Daniels, I think at the minute the one guy they can rely on, assuming he maintains this level of play. As I say, it's a one season thing, to get to the passer. And as I've said before, pass rushers very hard to find. So from that perspective, yeah, I get the deal. I wouldn't be too happy with it. I don't think they should have went as long term. Maybe another 2 years, maybe 3, with maybe some front-loaded money, something like that would have been more team-friendly, maybe kept the player more motivated if that's one of the reasons that he's struggled at times in his career. But from the Green Bay fan perspective, I mean, it did need to be done. I can understand why Packers fans may feel that way. More excitingly, though, they have brought in Martellus Bennett, the tight end who was with the Patriots for the last season during their Super Bowl run. Good signing. 3 years, 21 mil. That's fine. He's a very, very good tight end. Gives you solid run blocker and a dangerous receiver. Not a lot of those players left in the NFL these days, to be honest. So they have to be happy with that. He'll really bring a new element to that offense, where they've had some tight ends that can do things in the passing game the last few years. They haven't had anyone with the on-field reliability of Bennett. I know he's dealt with injuries at times, but on the field, he's definitely the most talented all-round tight end that Aaron Rodgers had to work with, and he certainly makes that offense far more dangerous. Perfectly reasonable contract. I know he's in his 30s now, but tight ends can play at a high level for a while. I mean, just look at how long Tony Gonzalez was playing. Jason Witten's still a perfectly serviceable player in Dallas, well into his mid-30s. There's no reason to think there'll be a massive drop-off in Bennett's level of play. So, great signing. Very, very happy Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure he makes that offense even better. And the other one, I haven't got the contract details on this at this point, but they've re-signed Don Barkley, the tackle. Whether he'll be starting next season, we'll see. Bakhtiari's, of course, locked in on that offensive line. Bilaga's so-so kind of player. Always good to keep some of your O-linemen. I think he's versatile enough that they could probably slot him in at guard if need be. He knows the system. May have more to say on it once I've seen the contract. I'm sure it's probably something perfectly reasonable for a backup. Really, when we're talking Packers at the moment, the key here this season is the losses, as it often is with some of the perennial playoff teams. We've got Micah Hyde, who's, I thought, a very good defensive back for them. Very versatile player. Gave them, someone they could play in the nickel and dime positions. Could play safety. Good special teamer. So his loss will certainly have an impact on some of the things that they can do, especially someone who has been in the system a while. It's very hard to replace that experience and versatility in the space of one off season. It's not something that can be done. They lost TJ Lang, the guard to the division rival Lions, which I discussed earlier. Tough move. Having lost Sitton as well last year, it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact this has on the interior of that line, which has been a real strength over the last few years. Also, I suppose in line with that, they lost JC Tretter, the centre. He's gone to the Browns. So I suppose in terms of the rest of the offense, you'd expect they'll get a running back at some point. It will improve what they had last year with Eddie Lacy missing most of the year. Montgomery still will be an option there if that's what they decide to continue to do. However, Packers fans, I expect, should be at least mildly concerned what's going to happen with the interior of that line. When they had Sitton and Lang, they had one of the top guard pairs in the league. Neither of them on the roster anymore, both within the division with rivals, which I suppose is just rubbing salt into that wound. They need to improve that, especially with the way Rodgers plays. I mean, he's great at evading pressure, but he will hold on to the ball. He will try and escape the pocket and make things happen. So he does need some support. It's not like a Drew Brees, 1-2-3 throw kind of system that they operate under. It'll certainly be interesting to see the transition that's made on those interior positions for this team going into next season. Julius Peppers, he's also left at this point in his career. Hard to replace in terms of what he does offer as a rotational player. His size. He's still got a high level of athleticism, and of course his experience on the field has going to be difficult for them to replace him. If they can get the inside backers, move Clay back to the outside, I don't think this will be a massive loss for them, but it's certainly going to be, it's that kind of veteran can only ever help a locker room. That's probably where it will have the most impact. Thus far, the Packers, it feels very much like business as usual. They've still got a fair few guys that haven't been signed by teams yet that are out there. Eddie Lacy probably being the biggest name among them. Will be interesting to see what happens there. I expect, as always, they'll attack free agency a little bit more in the next couple of weeks, get a few value signings, guys that are a bit more under the radar to fill some roles, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, and it'll be interesting to see what they do in the draft. I feel like their needs remain very much the same as they were before free agency, and you can now certainly add the interior of the line to that list. But that's the Packers for you. Thank you very much for listening. As always, like, share, subscribe. Feel free to check out the Patreon. Feel free to drop me some comments. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. Any suggestions for future videos, I'll be more than happy to look into providing those for you. We'll have the final in this series going up also this evening, and I'll be getting to the NFC East tomorrow. Pleasure as always. Hope you enjoyed the show, and as always, go Bucks.